The laughter hit her before the cold did. Sharp, sudden, cutting through the air like broken glass. It bounced off marble walls and climbed up crystal chandeliers, loud enough to make her flinch, even though she refused to show it. For one brief second she wondered if she had walked into the wrong room. Then she realized the truth was worse. She was exactly where they wanted her to be, seen, judged, exposed. She stood near the entrance, hands folded low, fingers pressed together to stop them from shaking. The black dress she wore was simple, clean, careful. No sparkle. No name stitched inside the collar that anyone here would recognize. It was the kind of dress you wore when you didn't want to be noticed. Tonight, that choice had failed her. Around her, heels paused, conversations slowed, eyes slid over her like measuring tape, then the whispers came, then the smiles, then the laughter, no longer shy, no longer hidden. This was not her world, they decided. Not this hall, not this night. The room was carved from money. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine. Gold-trimmed columns rising like silent guards. Chandeliers dripping light so heavy it felt like pressure. This was a gathering hosted by one of the city's oldest and wealthiest families. A dynasty built on generations of profit, power, and doors that never closed to them. Everyone here knew how to belong. Everyone except her. She was the poor black wife. The phrase moved through the room without being spoken out loud, passed from glance to glance, smirk to smirk. How did she get here? How did she get him? That question hung thick in the air, heavier than the perfume, heavier than the music playing softly in the background. Her husband stood across the room near the center of it all. His suit fit him perfectly, tailored, expensive, the kind of suit that told people he mattered before he even spoke. He laughed politely at something his uncle said. He raised his glass when someone toasted success. He did not look at her. She waited for him to notice. Just a glance, just a step in her direction. Something to say, "I see you, I'm with you." It didn't come. Instead, he stayed where he was, safe, comfortable, silent. That silence hurt more than the laughter. Silence was agreement. Silence was permission. Silence told everyone in that room that it was okay to treat her like a joke, because the man who brought her here wasn't going to stop it. Is that really who he married? A woman near the wall whispered, not bothering to lower her voice enough. "She looks like she wandered in from the street," another replied, lips curled in a smile that pretended to be harmless. A man laughed too loud. Someone else shook their head like it was a tragedy they were forced to witness. Her chest tightened. The air felt thin. Every sound seemed sharper now. The clink of glasses, the hum of quiet music, the soft scrape of shoes on marble. She heard everything. She felt everything. But her face stayed calm. Still, years of swallowing pain had taught her how to disappear while standing right in front of people. She had learned that skill early in life, in classrooms where teachers expected less from her before she ever spoke, in stores where security followed her too closely, in rooms where her voice was ignored until someone else repeated her words. She knew how to stand still while being reduced. So she stood. She told herself not to cry, not here, not now. She focused on her breathing, in, out, slow, measured. She reminded herself why she came. She reminded herself that she had survived worse rooms than this. Still, the sting was real. Her husband finally glanced her way, just for a second. Their eyes met across the space between them. She searched his face for regret, for discomfort, for anything that said he understood what was happening to her. Instead, his eyes flicked away. He turned back to his family. He smiled again. That was when something inside her shifted. Not anger, not yet, something colder, something clearer. She realized then that she was alone in this room in a way she hadn't been before, not just socially, not just emotionally, but deliberately. He had brought her here knowing what this place would do to her, knowing how they would see her, and he had chosen his comfort over her dignity. The laughter continued. It rolled over her in waves. People no longer cared if she heard them. They wanted her to hear. This was entertainment now. This was power being flexed without consequence. She thought about turning around, about walking out with her head held high. She imagined the sound of the door closing behind her, the relief of fresh air. For a moment, that escape tempted her. Then she remembered the weight in her purse. The folded document rested there, tucked between old receipts and a small mirror she barely used. It wasn't thick. It wasn't flashy. It didn't look like power. But it was. She hadn't planned to use it tonight. Not like this. She had told herself she would wait for the right moment. A private moment. A respectful conversation. She believed, foolishly, that respect would be offered to her eventually without proof. The room corrected her. She reached into her purse slowly. Her hand brushed against the paper. The familiar texture steadied her. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't a weapon. It was the truth. And the truth, she knew, had its own weight. Across the room, a man cleared his throat near the front. The family lawyer, gray hair, crisp suit. A man whose voice people listened to. The music faded. Conversations softened. Attention shifted. This was the part of the evening everyone had been waiting for. Announcements, legacies, numbers. She lowered her hand from her purse but kept her fingers curled around the document inside. Not yet, she told herself. Not yet. The lawyer began to speak about family history, about success, about the future. Names would be mentioned soon. Fortunes would be confirmed. Smiles would widen. She would be forgotten again. Her husband straightened his posture. Anticipation lit his face. He was ready to be celebrated. She watched him, really watched him. She saw the boy he once was, the man he had become, and the space between them filled with compromise. She wondered when he had stopped choosing her, or if he ever truly had. Another burst of laughter cut through her thoughts. Someone nearby made another joke at her expense. She didn't turn to look. She didn't need to. The words found her anyway. Her heart beat faster now, not from fear, from resolve. This night wasn't just about humiliation. She understood that clearly now. It was about timing, about how long the truth could sit quietly before demanding to be seen, about how people treated you when they believed you had nothing to take away from them. She had carried her secret for years, protected it, honored the woman who gave it to her. She had promised herself she would never use it to prove her worth, that she would let her character speak instead. Character, she learned, is often ignored until money speaks first. The lawyer paused mid-sentence, shuffling papers. The room leaned forward. This was it, the moment the night would turn in favor of those who already had everything. She took one step forward from the wall. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was enough. A few heads turned, then more. A ripple of attention spread through the crowd. The laughter faded into confused murmurs. Her husband frowned slightly, finally noticing her movement. His eyes followed her, questioning, warning. She met his gaze and did not look away. Her fingers tightened around the folded document in her purse. The paper felt warm now, like it had been waiting for her decision. The room held its breath, though no one knew why, and for the first time that night the silence belonged to her. The mockery didn't fade with time. It sharpened. What started as whispers became comments, said just loud enough to land. Smiles turned into smirks. The room had decided she was no longer a guest. She was entertainment. A woman stepped closer to her. Older, perfect hair, pearls resting on her neck like they had never known sweat or worry. This was the wealthy aunt, the kind of woman who had never been told no and had never needed to ask. She leaned in, close enough that her perfume wrapped around the air between them, and smiled with her mouth but not her eyes. "You must be very brave to show up like this," she said, her gaze moving slowly from the woman's face down to her dress, then back up again. "In this family, appearances matter?" The words were soft, polite, sharp enough to cut. Around them, others paused just long enough to listen. A few nodded. Some pretended not to hear but leaned closer anyway. Agreement moved through the group like a quiet wave. No one challenged it. No one defended her. This was how cruelty worked here, wrapped in manners, served with a smile. She felt her stomach tighten, brave, as if existing in this space were a test she had failed simply by arriving as herself. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again. She knew better than to argue with people who didn't see her as human enough to listen. Her husband appeared at her side then, close enough that his shoulder brushed hers. For a split second, hope sparked. Maybe now. Maybe he would say something. Maybe he would remind them she belonged. Instead, he leaned in and lowered his voice. His words meant only for her. "Just ignore them," he said. There was no warmth in it, only annoyance. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Harder." The word echoed in her head. Harder, as if the pain she was feeling were an inconvenience. As if enduring disrespect were a favor she owed him. As if the weight on her chest were something he had to carry too, and he was tired of it. She looked at him, really looked. His jaw was tight, his eyes flicked back toward his family, checking to see if anyone was watching. He wasn't worried about her feelings, he was worried about how this looked. She nodded once, not because she agreed, but because she understood. This was the role he needed her to play, quiet, grateful, invisible. He stepped away, relieved. The space he left behind felt colder than before. The room moved on without her like she had never been there. Conversations shifted back to their usual topics: stocks that had doubled, properties bought and sold without a second thought, vacation homes in places she had only seen on screens, names of people she didn't know but was expected to respect. She stood among them, unseen, a ghost in a black dress. She became background noise, a lesson whispered under breath, proof that love across class lines was a mistake, a warning to anyone else who thought they could cross into spaces not meant for them. She listened as people spoke about legacy, about what would be passed down, about how money moved like blood through generations. She thought about her own family, about hands worn from work, about sacrifices no one here would ever recognize as wealth. Time stretched, her feet ached, her heart felt heavier with every passing minute. Still, she stayed. Leaving would have been easier. Staying was its own kind of resistance. Then the music lowered again. The family lawyer stepped forward, clearing his throat. He was a tall man with careful posture and a voice trained to command attention. The room turned toward him instantly. This was what everyone had been waiting for. This was why the laughter, the judgments, the cruelty didn't matter to them. Because money was about to speak. Tonight, he began, is about legacy. Words settled into the room like a promise. He spoke about history, about responsibility, about ensuring the future of the family. Each sentence was met with nods and satisfied smiles. This was their language. This was their world. She watched her husband straighten his back. Anticipation lit his face in a way she hadn't seen directed at her in a long time. He adjusted his tie. He looked proud. Ready. The lawyer began reading names. One by one, applause followed. Soft at first, then louder. People smiled at each other. Some hugged. This was affirmation. This was validation measured in numbers. Then her husband's name echoed through the hall. Loud, clear, impossible to miss. Cheers erupted. Glasses lifted. Hands clapped. Someone slapped him on the back. He smiled wide, soaking it in, nodding graciously like this had always been his place. She clapped too, once, twice, alone. Her hands made almost no sound against each other, but she felt it anyway. The smallness of it, the distance between her applause and the roar around her. That was when the laughter came again. This time it wasn't subtle. It wasn't hidden behind a cough or a smile. It rang out loud and bold, cutting through the applause. Well, a voice called out, "What does she get?" A pause, then the punchline delivered with perfect timing. "A thank you card?" The room erupted. Laughter spilled out, unrestrained now. People bent forward. Shoulders shook. Someone wiped tears from their eyes like they had just heard the best joke of the night. She felt it hit her like a wave, hot, crushing. Her throat tightened, her vision blurred for just a second. She forced herself to breathe. She turned her head slightly, just enough to look at her husband. He didn't look back. He adjusted his cufflinks, smoothed his sleeve, smiled thinly as if embarrassed by the joke but unwilling to confront it. He stayed silent. That silence landed heavier than any laugh. That was the moment something inside her shifted completely. Not rage, not tears, clarity. She understood then that this was never going to stop. Not tonight, not ever. As long as she accepted this position, as long as she shrank herself to fit their comfort, this room would always feel free to take from her. The laughter continued, but it felt distant now, like it was happening behind glass. Her heart was pounding, loud in her ears. She felt the weight of every eye on her, even the ones pretending not to look. And then she stood, not fast, not with drama, just calm, deliberate. The movement caught attention. Conversation stumbled. A few people stopped laughing mid-breath. Heads turned. Her husband noticed then. His smile faded. Confusion crept into his expression. He looked at her like she was breaking a rule they had never spoken out loud. She stepped forward. Her heels clicked softly against the marble. Each step felt heavier than the last, but she didn't rush. Her posture stayed straight, her shoulders steady. Inside, her heart raced, but she refused to let it show. The lawyer paused. His eyes flicked toward her, uncertain. This wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't expected. The murmurs began. Whispers threaded through the room. People leaned toward each other, curious now, amused, annoyed. She stopped a few steps away from the lawyer, close enough to be heard, far enough to keep her space. For a moment she said nothing. The silence stretched, thick, uncomfortable, the kind of silence people like this weren't used to. They needed noise, laughter, applause. Silence made them nervous. She felt her husband's gaze burning into her back. She knew what he was thinking. Sit down. Don't do this. Don't embarrass me. She lifted her chin slightly and spoke. I think, she said, her voice quiet but steady, there's been a mistake. The words fell into the room and stayed there. No laughter followed, no applause, no quick response, just silence. It spread from the front of the hall to the back like a held breath. People froze, eyes locked on her. The lawyer blinked, unsure of what to say. Her husband took a step forward, then stopped himself. In that silence, everything felt suspended. The power, the money, the cruelty, all of it hung in the air, waiting, and no one knew yet what she was about to take back. The room was still holding its breath when she reached into her purse. No rush, no shaking, just a slow, deliberate movement that felt louder than the laughter ever had. Every eye tracked her hand as it emerged with a single folded document. Plain paper, no gold seal, no dramatic flourish. Yet something about the way she held it made the air change. She extended it toward the lawyer. He hesitated before taking it, his brows tightening in confusion. His fingers brushed the paper, and that was when his hands began to tremble. Not hers. His. He unfolded the document once, scanning quickly, as if expecting to find a mistake that would let him dismiss this interruption and move on. His eyes widened. He unfolded it again, slower this time, reading every line. The color drained from his face in real time. A murmur rippled through the room. He cleared his throat, but the sound came out dry. He looked up at her, then back down at the paper, as if hoping it would change when he looked away. It didn't. This, he said slowly, carefully, like each word carried weight he was afraid to drop, changes everything. The room leaned in as one, bodies angled forward, smiles faded, confusion replaced confidence. This was no longer entertainment. This was something else, something dangerous. She felt the attention settle on her, heavy and full. For the first time that night, she didn't feel small under it. She felt steady. She spoke before anyone else could interrupt. Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried because it was calm. My grandmother built an empire none of you noticed, she said. She paused, letting the words sink in. Because she was black, because she was a woman, because she didn't need your approval. Gasps escaped lips that had laughed minutes earlier. A few people shook their heads instinctively, as if denial could undo what they were hearing. She left it to me, she continued. The lawyer swallowed hard. He adjusted his glasses with a hand that still wasn't steady. The assets, he said, forcing the words out. Total several $100 million. Silence crashed down like thunder. It wasn't the quiet of politeness. It was the silence of shock, the kind that leaves ears ringing, the kind that makes people aware of their own breathing. Her husband's smile collapsed. It fell off his face as if it had never belonged there. His eyes widened, darting between her and the lawyer, searching for a way out, a correction, a punchline that never came. Fear replaced pride so quickly it was almost painful to watch. The same people who had laughed now stared at her like they were seeing her for the first time. Some stood up without realizing they were doing it. Others leaned back, suddenly uncomfortable in their seats. Whispers spread, frantic and confused. Apologies hovered in the air, half-formed, unsure where to land. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She didn't raise her voice or demand attention. She simply stood there, letting the truth exist without decoration. Her gaze found her husband again. You loved me when you thought I was small, she said softly. There was no bitterness in it, just honesty. But you shrank me when I needed you most. The words cut deeper than any insult ever could. He stepped toward her instinctively, reaching for her hand like muscle memory, like a man grabbing for balance as the ground shifts beneath him. His fingers brushed empty air. She stepped back, just enough to remind him that access was no longer automatic. In that moment, power shifted. Not with a shout, not with revenge, but completely. She hadn't come to humiliate anyone. She hadn't waited all these years for this night just to flip the script and laugh back. This wasn't about them at all. This was about her. About reclaiming the space she had been told she didn't deserve. The lawyer cleared his throat again, this time louder, trying to regain control of a room that no longer belonged to him. Legally speaking, he said, choosing his words carefully, she now controls the majority stake. The sentence landed hard. A dynasty built on generations of certainty cracked open in a single breath. The future they had all assumed was suddenly uncertain. Power, real power, had moved hands. She felt it then. Not triumph, relief. Years of carrying herself quietly, years of being underestimated, years of swallowing comments and softening her presence to make others comfortable, all of it loosened its grip at once. Her husband opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't sound like regret too late. She turned slightly, addressing the room without fully facing it. "I didn't come here to take anything from you," she said. "I came because I was invited. I stayed because I respect myself." No one laughed. No one interrupted. She could see it in their faces now, the recalculation, the sudden effort to remember how they had spoken to her earlier, and the fear of what that might cost them. Respect rushed in where contempt had been moments before, clumsy and obvious. She didn't wait for it. She looked once more at the man who had chosen silence over her dignity. There was sadness there, yes, but also clarity. She understood now that love without respect was just another form of ownership. She turned and walked away from the center of the room. Her heels echoed against the marble, the sound sharp and steady. Conversations didn't resume behind her. People didn't know how. The night they thought they controlled had slipped through their fingers. As she reached the edge of the hall, she paused. Not for them, for herself. She had spent so long being careful, being quiet, being grateful for crumbs. Tonight had reminded her that dignity didn't need permission, and worth didn't need witnesses. She walked out of the marble hall without looking back. Behind her, the dynasty scrambled to understand what had happened. Ahead of her, a life she no longer had to justify waited. And somewhere between those two worlds, a lesson hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Never mistake silence for weakness. Never confuse humility with smallness, and never laugh at someone whose story you don't know, because power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just stands up. The party didn't end with music or laughter or a final toast. It ended with confusion. With people glancing at one another, unsure of what to say or how to leave without being seen. One by one, guests began to drift toward the exits. Their movements were quiet now. Careful. The same mouths that had laughed earlier stayed closed. The same hands that had clapped for wealth now held coats and purses a little tighter. Shame replaced champagne. Apologies floated through the air like feathers with no weight. Soft words. Forced smiles. "I didn't mean it like that. You must understand. We had no idea." None of it reached her. None of it mattered. Words spoken after the truth reveal themselves too late to heal anything. She stood near the door, the marble floor still cold beneath her feet, but her chest felt lighter than it had all night. People avoided her eyes now. Some nodded politely, suddenly respectful. Others looked away, afraid she might remember their faces. She did, not with anger, with clarity. Her husband followed her, his steps rushed, his confidence gone. The man who had stood tall moments ago now seemed smaller, uncertain, like the ground beneath him no longer trusted him. "I didn't know," he said as they reached the doorway. His voice cracked on the words. "If I had—" She turned to face him. Her eyes were calm, not cold, not cruel, just steady, the kind of calm that comes when a decision has already been made. "That's the point," she said gently. "You shouldn't need wealth to defend someone you love." The words landed between them and stayed there. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. He searched her face for something he could hold on to. Forgiveness, reassurance, a sign that this moment could still be undone. He found none of it. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't accuse him. She didn't list his failures. She didn't need to. The truth was enough. She turned away, and she walked out alone, not abandoned, not broken, free. The night air outside was cool and clean. It filled her lungs in a way the marble hall never had. For the first time in hours, maybe years, she felt like she could breathe without shrinking herself. The building behind her stood tall and bright, but it no longer intimidated her. It was just stone and glass now, no longer a judge, no longer a gatekeeper. She didn't look back. In the days that followed, the story spread faster than anyone expected. Headlines exploded across screens and newspapers, names were mentioned, figures were repeated, Power shifted quietly but completely. Meetings were called, lawyers spoke in hushed tones, doors that had once been closed suddenly opened. People who had never noticed her before suddenly wanted her time, but the real transformation had already happened. It had happened in the silence before she spoke, in the moment she chose herself over comfort, in the step she took forward when the room expected her to stay still. She didn't destroy anyone. She didn't use her inheritance to punish or humiliate. She didn't return cruelty with cruelty. She lived well, intentionally, with boundaries, with peace. She invested in places no one had bothered to look. She supported people who reminded her of herself before the world tried to make her small. She honored her grandmother's legacy not with noise but with purpose. As for the family she left behind, they learned something far more painful than losing money. They learned what it costs to underestimate someone. They learned that dignity doesn't announce itself. It doesn't wear labels or demand attention. It stands quietly, waiting to be recognized, or ignored at one's own risk. They learned that strength can be soft-spoken. That power doesn't always arrive with warning. That silence is not the absence of value. And they learned that the people you laugh at today may decide your future tomorrow. Because the greatest inheritance isn't money. It's knowing your worth, even when the whole room tries to convince you otherwise.